those of you who got an invite, welcome to Nerd Prom.
No matter where in the world you are, we're all Nerds International. With the hyphen. Nerds International proudly presents.
We want to take you on a quest for knowledge. One that will take us from ancient medieval fantasy across the far reaches of space to the distant future. To many savage worlds.
Yeah, I just have to pet my pea lion first. You'll get it once you listen to the latest episode, unless Gary already told you. He messed with me in front of Clint, made me look like a damn fool.
So is that Clint, that's Clint Black, right? You guys, yeah, I thought so. And he was slagging us off, saying that we were idiots in the last episode. I mean, he's correct, but it just hurts, you know.
Can we call this episode Ripers versus Solo Man Kanye?
Why not?
Solo Man Kanye.
Welcome to episode 61 of the Wild Eye Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to Pinnacle Entertainment's Savage Worlds, aimed beginners and veterans alike. What's going on, gentlemen? You're all looking svelte, feeling fine, if I can feel you, that is.
Please don't. But today we've got a very special guest on the show. He's none other than Harrison Hunt himself. I'm here. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate that.
Who's that?
That's me. No, I'm just kidding. We got Connor Warden on the show. Say hello, Connor.
Hello. How are we?
We're all very good, and thank you very much for coming on. Basically, I played in a few of Connor's games recently, one being his up-and-coming punk rock setting, but another being a Rippers game that was absolutely amazing. So today we're going to be doing a bit of a showdown between Rippers versus the Savage World of Michael Caine, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing.
Awesome.
Isn't that right?
Yeah, it's been months since our last Showdown episode, mainly because we've been doing these little reviews now for a few months, so maybe we felt we didn't need them, but I know Rippers and Solomon Caine are two great settings for Savage Worlds, and they have a few things in common, so I figured we'd do that. And then you found Connor, who's GM for hire, and you paid him, and now he's here. You'll talk about Rippers.
I didn't pay him. I want to point that out in case the tax man is listening.
Oh, dude, I used to be a GM for hire. It was a great thing, but no. I'm glad I packed that in.
Wait, did you really?
Yeah, I used to run sort of escape room plus type things.
Oh.
But immersive live action adventure experience is what we called them, because we were posh knobs.
Now, did you have volunteer people come and volunteer to get locked in rooms, or did you just find unwilling participants on the street and then just lock them up and took their money?
Well, it was a sort of two-way thing, because that second one isn't actually GMing, that's just kidnapping. But it's still a valid career choice in some ways. It was one of these things where you advertise on the internet, people pay money to come play your games. But you eventually realised that the two or three of us that were running this were just getting paid to run games for people. We did this for a couple of years or so because there were enough hipsters out there in London that really want to do this.
That's how I get players for my games. I have to kidnap them. Gary knows that.
That's because your games suck.
I'm trying to sort of hanging a large net above the doorway to my friendly local gaming store. And so someone will walk underneath it and they'll go, a copy of D&D 5th Ed, with a cardboard box and a stick. But if they go to pick it up, they get trapped in the box and they wake up at my house.
That's dangerous, though. What if you catch a child in a net with a copy of D&D 5th Ed underneath it, that can lead to getting arrested.
It could also just lead to serious issues in that child's life from then on. The child might grow up into a gamer, which is a fate worse than death.
Exactly. Good point. Very good point.
That's a good a good tip because I might use it because usually I just use the fly catching tape, the ribbon.
And they get away, which is not what you want.
That explains why you're always gaming with very small people. All the people could just pull themselves off the tape, but all the little ones.
Awesome. So what's going on, Harrison? You just finished your Fallout?
Yeah.
Game?
Yeah. It was really sad because we this whole game, like, we've been playing Savaged Fallout, and essentially the whole game we spent it sort of cruising around the wastelands. Our whole party had left our previous settlement because we ran out of potatoes, and then we were looking for a new settlement, and we found this new one called Cool Hand Ranch, and we settled there, and they didn't have a sheriff, so we decided to prove ourselves, and then the entire party became the sheriffs, and there was 5 of us, so they had 5 sheriffs in this town now. Yeah, it's ridiculous, but who cares? Anyway, the point is...
So ran out of potatoes. Is that Fallout Ireland? Or something like that?
No, it's America actually, but I can't remember where we're from. But it's not near Washington. Anyway, point is that then after we became sheriffs, our plan was to get the people on side, and we did that by making burgers out of all of the people that we arrested, and we managed to cover that up, serve them all these burgers, and then we're going to build the world's biggest and best casino and make this place like the best place in the wasteland. Once we come up with this plan, like, that we were going to do, the very next game we all got killed and TPK'd, and we were going to spend like the next few months of gameplay like building this casino. And what happened was we found out that there's this like kind of laser quest type arena, like a laser game in our town that was currently inactive, and we wanted to get it active so that all the people could come and play it in this town as part of an attraction. But there were death claws in there, and so we decided to like get these local like law enforcement people to go in there and sort it out for us. And then while they were in there, we were going to lock them in and sell tickets to the event, like, so all people could come and watch them fighting these death claws. And these local law enforcement people weren't up for it, like they were called the Red Wings. And so we decided to try and knock them out and put them in there against their will and then lock them in. And it turns out they were really tough, and they just killed a lot of us in one, like, it was horrible. And we just died in the most unceremonious way. But the funniest thing is that James's character, this guy Frank, he basically got killed, rolled on an incapacitation table, but rolled so amazingly that he got back up. And then while he was trying to escape, he jumped out of a window and then rolled on incapacitation again, broke his neck and died from falling out of a window. So that was it. TPK.
That's how you fall out.
Get the hell out of here, Eric.
You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. Fired.
I know you're the boss of this podcast, but not anymore.
Harrison, I thought you guys were the sheriffs. How was there all of a sudden other sheriffs?
Because these other guys just rolled into town and said, okay, now that the mayor's dead, because we killed the mayor, they said now this town's under martial law. Like, we're now law enforcement in this town. We're bigger than you. We're taking over. And we said, you can't do this. We're the sheriffs and all of this. And then they just decided to take over. It was unbelievable.
This is kind of rude.
I know, it was. And we were gravely offended. That's why we tried to fight them. But it turns out they were like legendary or something. And they killed us. So it was pretty horrible. Hated it. And so, 11 sessions and, 2 TPKs, and, so we're done with Fallout now, and I'm genuinely upset by it. So that's Fallout. But Gary, how about you? You've been playing your weekly 50 Fathoms game, right? You've been trying to finish the Plot Point campaign. How's that going?
No.
You don't want to talk about it?
Oh man, it's going all right. We did Stumpy Pete. I got a lot of players at my table, so it's kind of dragging with me keeping everybody involved, I gotta say. But after we got Stumpy Pete's treasure and took out the giant monk ape, we rolled down into Maroa, which is the Atani city, and I'm running the deal where the Beneathers, or the Neithers they're called, are trying to take over the they want all the trees and stuff. Want to make some money that way. So there's a big explosion. My party's going to do, we're going to do mass battle rules for my first time DMing Savage Worlds. Not that this is my first time DMing, Savage Worlds, but it'd be the first time I've had to use the mass battle rules. So that's happening. And other than that, it gets a little monotonous when you're going from port to port. So I think I'm going to cut that out of the game. I find that flipping the cards, rolling the dice, adding up the skills, doing the fishing that they're trying to do, keeping track of all of the provisions and stuff like that is getting to be a bit much. So I'm going to pull it. Words to the other 50 fathomers that are thinking about playing this game. I would skip that part. I think it's kind of the suck.
But
You don't think they have fun with this?
No, you can tell. You know what I mean? You can feel the room. It's definitely.
I just feel that like you're not seeing it from the right perspective. You're assuming that the game's meant to be fun, which is the first fatal flaw with a lot of people with role-playing games. It's meant to be like an immersive simulation experience of life aboard a ship.
And being
So
aboard
I
a ship
think
is
slowly
miserable.
battling off scurvy is and the monotony of just looking out to sea and seeing no land for 30 days at a time. You'd be able to bring that home so that people can truly immerse themselves in their characters, you know?
Yeah, I think you're
I'm
doing
really-
it right, Gary.
No, that's what it feels like. It feels like the fatigue levels are actually like not on the PCs, but on my actual players.
Yeah, so you know what you should do, Gary, is like every so often just splash salt water in their faces.
Yeah. Have like a rotating floor so that they feel like they're seasick. You know?
They get. What if I just when I talk to them, I just get spittle?
Good idea. But you're
I
playing
don't
with
need
kids,
that.
right?
No.
Okay, thank God for that.
No, I'm not gonna go spit on children.
Again.
I mean, maybe I would, but they would deserve it for probably doing something dumb.
What has this show become? Do you remember when this used to be classy?
No.
No.
No, me neither. Okay. Well, anyway, it sounds like it's going badly.
Nah, I would just say, you know what? If you're going to play some 50 Fathoms, you might want to do the port to port kind of a thing for a little while. But after a while, you're going to find, I think, that it gets to be a bit tedious, like counting ammo in your guns and stuff like that. But your gun holds like 1,000 bullets, and you're still trying to keep track, even though you really don't need to.
Yeah, maybe just
That's
streamline
what
it.
So, what are we doing today?
All right.
What's the Haps show? Are we doing Ripers?
Yeah, we're doing Rippers versus Solomon Kane. Yeah, because they're kind of similar, right? So should we get on with it?
Let's do it.
Yes. Let's
Yeah.
do that. Showdown.
It's time for the showdown. 2 books go in, only one comes out. It's time to get brutal in this hideous bout.
Wait. How is it going to be brutal? I mean, it's people discussing rival books, right? I mean, that's not really a battle per se. I mean, it is a showdown, but it's not really a battle.
Oh, you're no fun. Go away.
So both of these settings are really, well, they've been around for a bit. Although with Rippers, there was a newer edition that came out, Resurrected, but both of them are like 10 years old at least, so they've been around. They're quite popular, and if you haven't played them yet, well, here's how you're going to find out about them and maybe help you decide which one you want to play. So let's just go around and maybe just a quick introduction, each of you, of what the game is about. And let's start with the guest, Connor. Rippers, what is it about?
All right, so what it's about, I mean, take the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, right? Then throw in the fantastic Hugh Jackman Van Helsing film, smash the two together, and what you've got is a sort of secret society working in the background of the late Victorian era. So, 1890s is roughly the setting. And all around the world, there's monsters fighting. They're also organized. As per the setting, they formed themselves a cabal, which is led by Dracula and the Mummy and Frankenstein and all that lot. And so in response, the heroes have teamed up and are fighting an eternal struggle in the darkness, while also not trying to give away the fact that the supernatural is real. because, it turns out that if you go and kill a mad scientist, you're still actually guilty of murder. So you need to try and get around this somehow, because ordinary people don't believe in monsters.
All of that with London society, right? The posh society and.
Yeah, exactly. So the sort of two, I guess, main thematic components outside of action adventure are Victorian society. Social class is a massive aspect. So one of your derived stats in this is status, which determines where you are in the social ladder. If you're of lower social status, you are better at taunting people of higher social status, because it really gets under their skin when people they think of as beneath them can get one over on them. Meanwhile, if you're of higher social status, you're better at intimidating people below you, because, you have the money and power to just ruin their lives. And so actually having social status carry a lot of weight, be tied to your income, be tied to how you can access certain areas, is really good as far as I see it.
Yeah, I love that part.
The other sort of core thing that the game does is to talk about the mind. Because obviously 1890s, you've got a lot of psychological research going on. You've got the breakthrough of psychiatry as a discipline. And so it plays with this, the idea that being exposed to stressful situations, being exposed to horrific things can make you less sane, less stable. And this really manifests itself in the game's core unique selling point, which is its Ripper tech. The idea that that when you kill monsters, you're not just killing them. You're also going, you know what, this vampire was great and all, and was a really tough fight, but I kind of wish I had fangs. So I'm going to get my mate who's a dentist to come and rip its teeth out, then install its fangs in me, so that I can bite people a bit better. And
wait, what?
Yeah, that's the premise of the game. Is I just want to bite real good, or be able to turn into a werewolf, or have the organs of a mummy, or not age, or be able to fly, or turn invisible. Like there's a wide range of things that this Ripper tech can do for you by sticking bits of monsters into yourself.
The way I have heard it described is like sort of Victorian cyberware.
Yeah, exactly. It works a lot like that, and it plays into a lot of the cyberpunk tropes. The idea that the more of this stuff you have in you, the less human you're becoming. There's a lot of the whole philosophy in there. He who fights monsters must make sure that he does not himself become a monster.
Yeah.
You've got that physically manifested in that the more you fight monsters, the more you realize that you as a normal human being are just utterly outclassed by the monsters. So how do you try and even the playing field? You have to literally take the monsters into yourself. And there's a lot of really good role-playing in there with different factions within this secret society talking about their opinions on whether you should or should not be installing monsters into yourself. Like, for some reason, those who work for the church are just not that big on people becoming vampires to fight vampires. They think that's not God's will, for whatever reason.
They're such prudes.
Yeah, but at the same time, the flip side of this is that if you get exposed to something that's too stressful to you or too scary for you, and you've got monster bits inside you, there's a chance the monster will just take over, and so you'll just turn around and start killing your friends, which is a barrel of laughs, as you'd expect, but leads itself to a really interesting balancing act between how you compose your party. There's a very definite reason not to start sticking more and more monster bits into yourself. Because, yeah, I become better at killing monsters. The problem is that the better I am at killing monsters, the better I am at killing my mates as well, once I turn on them. And if you ever go too far, you lose the character permanently. That character is now just a villainous NPC with the mind of a monster.
That is amazing.
That is pretty cool. I like that.
What about you, Harrison? You think you can beat that? You think Solomon Kane is cooler than that?
Not really, no. To be perfectly honest, no, it's not really. So Solomon Kane obviously is based on the works of Robert E. Howard, which basically, for those that don't speak very good English, means Robert like Howard.
I thought his name was Robert E.
Yeah, it's Robert E. Yeah, as in Robert like.
He was Robert similar.
Yeah, Robert E. Howard. So, man, I've lost my train of thought. Damn it. So yeah, this game is basically set in the late 16th century, early 17th century, and it has a lot of religious themes, because at the time the Catholic Church was like one of the biggest powers around, and the main character in those books, Solomon Kane, was a Puritan, and basically the Puritan movement was all about doing radical things such as letting people that weren't in high religious seats read the Bible, for example. And as a result, he was kind of a character that had these... Realistically, he was a one-note character that was all about the idea of good, and that was it. And the sort of world is exactly our world as it was at that time, with all of those political things intact and religious things intact, except for one difference. There are monsters about, right? And most of the world doesn't believe that the monsters actually exist, except for those few people that have seen them and that. And the monsters are also semi-rare, but they're big enough a problem that there are people out there that need to fight them. As a result, there are players in that need to go out, kill monsters. You've got things like werewolves, you've got mummies, you've got lizard men, you've got all of this stuff, and you've got to go out and kill them. Now, the thing about it is that the actual rules and things like this, there is not a lot that it does very different to core. So the characters in that you have, you don't really have things like in Rippers where the characters are sort of becoming monsters or anything like this. When I first played this, the storyline that I played in a one-shot, and this guy basically had this theme where you were characters that were resurrected from hell to have one more chance to go and kill monsters to redeem themselves for the bad things that they've done. When I thought this was one of the coolest premises I've ever seen in a game, so I thought, okay, yeah, I'm going to pick this up. When I started reading the book, that was not actually part of the book. That was something he made up. In actuality, the characters...
redemption. Redemption is still a big theme in Solomon Kane. If you follow the path of Caine, that's what it's about. But
exactly. But the book, the Path of Caine sort of plot point campaign is a lot about redemption, and that is one of the main themes. But it does say in the book that you can sort of play anyone. So you could be somebody that's like... okay, your family's been attacked by monsters, so you go out and kill them, or whatever. Your village has been ransacked by monsters, so you go out and kill them. You've seen a monster once, it scared you, so you go out and kill them. That's the kind of thing. So that's basically it. I mean, and as a result, like, the monsters aren't like intelligent or organised, or they can be in some cases. For example, there's a quest in one of the it's called the Savage Foes of Solomon Kane, where there's these two people that are basically just murderers, and they've taken over this house, and it's not really a monster per se, but the ghost that is haunting the house is really upset because it owns this house, and is like, man, I really want my house back, but there's these two murderers in there, and so you have to go and kill the murderers to appease the ghost. So that is, you're not always killing monsters, you're just trying to get rid of them in any way, shape or form. And that's essentially it. That's the setting. It's nowhere near as cool as Rippers now, you put it like that.
Well, it's a different tone. I think Rippers, while still kind of scary, it's still you're playing real heroes, whereas in Solomon Kane, to me, it feels more gritty and darker and
yeah, it's dark fantasy and horror.
Bit.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you read it in the context of Robert E. Howard. Like, Howard obviously likes his good guys, but he also really likes his broken good guys, his people that do good things as a sort of act of desperation, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you read Wolf's Head, like his sort of first really big famous story. And spoiler alert, though it's not really a spoiler because it's published in the 1920s, so whatever. If you've not read Wolf's Head by now, go out and read it. But it has someone that you think is the villain for a huge amount of it. He's got a huge amount broken about him, but inevitably he gives himself up in sacrifice that he might be redeemed. Like, that's the way that Howard writes a lot of his stories. That's one of the things that Robert E. Howard is interested in.
Yeah,
and so if that's the kind of thing that you're getting out of the role-playing game, then they've done a fantastic job of actually capturing what Robert E. Howard is about as a writer.
Yeah, I guess the thing about it is that it does play on the horror mostly, I would say, in the book, like a lot. It's mainly like a lot of horror, a lot of
psychological.
Action. Yeah, it's a lot of everything, to be perfectly honest with you. If you look at the like the Savage Foes thing, it's got a bit of everything. It's got like psychological. It's got a bit of body horror in there. It's got everything, and that's what I quite enjoyed about the setting when I played it, because we managed to explore loads of different things, and in the book itself, with the setting goes through sort of a lot of main locations in the world in the role-playing game, where it'll be like, okay, here's England, here's Europe as a big thing, and then here's Asia, and each one, it sort of explores the tropes of horror at that time in those locations, and that's what's kind of cool about it. So yeah, it's very varied. I don't know if the original books are much like that, but I quite enjoyed the setting for that. It's not quite as bombastic and crazy, but it is definitely really really interesting.
Cool. What do you think, Gary? So you good so far? Any questions?
Yeah, I just realized that we didn't ask you how your game was going, Eric.
What game?
That's what I thought. So, Solomon Kane, what kind of critters, bad guys do you scrap when you get into the Solomon Kane action? Are you fighting like Conan style, maybe big carrion birds, or maybe like flying whales or stuff like that?
Well, the monsters can be quite typical, but you got snake men, you got goat men, you got goblins, but goblins aren't how you think. You got these little things that come in pots that replicate themselves. You got krakens, you got mummies, you got all the classics in there basically. We did one where there was a play about vampires, right? And it turns out that real vampires were in the play, and then they had been stealing all the stagehands and turning them into vampires.
Nice.
There's a lot of worldwide mythology in there,
so
like you said, with going to different countries and all that. There's a lot of that.
The snake men are from the African region. You got like hopping vampires from China and stuff like this. So yeah, they take from all of the different mythologies. It's wicked, the bruv. I'm looking in it now, right? You got Western vampire, you got Wendigos, right? I think they're from Native America, right?
Yes, Ajiba Cree.
Yeah.
Mythology.
If you wanted were-jaguars, Solomon Kane's got them. If you wanted werewolf, I mean, yeah, that's in pretty much every Savage World setting. But Amazon woman, that's in there. So enough said.
Ooh, how would you defeat an Amazon woman?
You can't.
Okay.
Too powerful.
Inside of Rippers, you have houses and stuff like that, or I'm not sure what you call them, but like, I guess they're called lodges, I believe. I've read a little bit of Rippers and stuff like that. I've never actually played Rippers. I do actually own the box set and stuff. I've skimmed through it, and I'm just kind of curious to know what would a typical Rippers game look like. And here's where I'm coming from. It's almost 2020. We have the internet. Everybody in this day and age knows what a vampire is all about, or what a werewolf is all about, but maybe they didn't know this kind of stuff back in the 1920s, late Victorian era. So how do your players, or is there a way that you control your players so that they don't do any kind of like metagaming and say, oh, I know to drive a stake through the vampire's heart? It's
a funny old one where a lot of the premise is that, you've been inducted as a member of this secret society. And therefore, a lot of the basic ideas, drive a stake through a vampire's heart, shoot a werewolf with silver bullets, those are commonly known weaknesses within that organization because you've been inducted into a league of professional monster hunters. So at least the sort of initial leaping point, the initial how do we put down something that doesn't seem able to be put down, is resolved. that means that you get rid of the metagaming issue quite easily by going, there's an in-universe explanation as to why you know this. You've been told this specifically. Like when Mina Harker or when Abraham Van Helsing comes along and recruits you into this, I assume they sort of give you a pamphlet of, so you're a Ripper now. Everything you need to know about staking the undead, right? And that's where a lot of this goes. Now, what I found with Rippers that is different to probably my main Savage World setting, Deadlands, is there aren't that many things in Rippers that require a very specific thing to kill them. There's a lot of them where doing these things will give it a bit of extra damage, or you have to stake a vampire through the heart. But there's no enemies that have incredibly specific, without wanting to give Deadlands spoilers, incredibly specific things that are actually capable of hurting them, rather than just shaking them. So I don't think there's really that much of an issue there. Now, in terms of what your average Rippers game looks like, I'm afraid my main experience of running this recently was I spent about 2.5 years running it as a parlor LARP for about 30 or 40 people, which means that I've got quite a different view on what a Rippers game looks like, at least in my mind and imagination now. But it means we didn't do things like really use the lodge rules that much, because it was too big to get 40 people to all decide which lodge upgrades they were going to get for their base and what sort of rolling upkeep they were going to do, which is fine in a group of 4 or 5 people because they can talk it out between them. 40 people, not so much. But I guess your average Rippers game is, we go around the world. Each plot point is quite globe-trotting in its own way. We go around the world following a trail of clues. This is where, at first, I wasn't that sold on the idea of a big conspiracy where all the monsters know each other and have an army of monsters at their disposal. But actually, when you realise that the core conceit behind Rippers, in terms of what the PCs do, is we go to somewhere, we find a conspiracy, we find some sort of big world-ending plot that these guys are all coming together to stage manage this time. And so we start in England, then we have to travel off to America, then we go to Germany, then to China, then to South Africa, and so on and so forth. It gets you all across the game world. Now, in terms of comparing it to what Harrison was saying about Solomon Kane, it puts me in kind of a weird place. So it has all this globe-trotting behind it. But what Solomon Kane does significantly better is actually having local mythology and local conceptions of monsters much more heavily influence the bestiary. Whereas Rippers goes, right, here are your 4 basic types of vampire. They are your young vampire, your sort of feral Nosferatu vampire, your vampire lord, and your Bride of Dracula vampire concubine. Whenever this calls for a vampire, no matter where you are in the world, you just use the same stat block. They do all the same things. And while that's nice and easy to run, you're not having to sit there and sift through multiple different types of vampire to find you're using exactly the right one for that part of the world. I find it makes it a little bit more shallow than Solomon Kane in that way. But at the same time, like I say, Rippers has a lot of other unique selling points going for it in a way that Kane doesn't. So
I will say, though, one of the things is that when I was playing Solomon Kane, it did mean that it much more lent itself to a monster of the week type game, owing to the fact that because each of these monsters and things like that do have local mythology, the overarching plot needed to be something that wasn't linked to those things. So the way I ran the game was that there was a big world-ending threat, and they needed to become powerful to end it, to be able to beat it in a year's time. And the way that they were doing that was by doing similar thing by globetrotting and then defeating all these things and ridding the world of evil. And that meant that each thing was kind of a self-contained story. So it was kind of cool because, like, in France, they had like a very French-feeling mission. In Dover, there was like a really English one, and they had a couple of English ones, and then they moved over to Germany and did some stuff there. And in China, they had this like really like Chinese ghost type thingy, and similar thing in Korea. And it was like they have missions that feel like really well researched and well localized, and that's awesome. But it does mean that they don't necessarily feel connected, and that it does mean that, like, I know there is a plot point campaign for this, but I did read some of it and I wasn't a massive fan. So that is one. Although it's great, it is an issue as well to an extent. What could be an issue for some people.
Yeah, we all know you don't like plot point campaigns anyway, so it's not a knock on that one.
You know, aside from the Saga of the Goblin Horde one, I just haven't read one that I like.
See, I'm in a similar sort of boat to you. I find that, say, the Deadlands plot point campaigns I loved. The East Texas University one I really like. But for the most part, I find it quite difficult to find a plot point campaign that actually grabs me. A lot of them feel sort of like an excuse to trek people all across the map, kind of arbitrarily. Which I know, yes, is one of the points of writing a plot point campaign, is to take people all throughout your game world. That's fine. But I always find that my players don't necessarily get gripped by the big overarching story and want to go accomplish their own personal goals.
Yeah. Connor, have you read both of the plot point campaigns for Rippers, the original one and the resurrected one?
Yes.
Well, how do you compare them? What do you think about them?
So, I prefer the original to Resurrected, but this is largely because Resurrected for me felt like the flavour and the story just came out of nowhere. It didn't really have any foreshadowing in the original books that this was a plot that was going to be occurring in the world, and so it felt just a bit out of left field, as though they dealt with all the things they really, really cared about in the original plot point campaign. So what was left when they wanted to do a sequel? It feels to me a lot like Rippers Resurrected did a sequel when they actually just wanted to do a reboot, where they wanted to just bring all the rules up to date and really talk about, let's get some new mechanics and some new feel in there to fit Savage Worlds Deluxe. They felt pressured to bring a sequel in rather than a reboot.
I agree. It's like watching a great movie and then it concludes and you can't see where that story could go on, but then Hollywood comes up with a sequel and it makes no sense. It was just like a sequel for the sake of having a sequel.
Well, this is it. I mean, it's not to say that the original plot point campaign is perfect. I actually think the thing that really annoys me about the original plot point campaign, and the only reason I'm complaining about this is because it's a setting that I adore. It's a setting that I care a lot about, and therefore I care about trying to make it the best thing it can be, because I want to see it flourish and I want to see it succeed and I want to see more people get invested in it, is the fact that to me there's no core mystery in the original Ripper's plot point. They sort of tell you quite up front who Jack the Ripper is, and it's just sort of going about trying to fight him.
Yeah, because I bought basically my wife said, "What do you want for your birthday?" And I said, "The Rippers box set," and I got given it. So basically, the thing about it is I got this based on your recommendation, Connor, and one of the things you said was that it sort of lifts the veil on a lot of things very early in Rippers, and that's one of the problems with it.
This is it. I sort of wanted a game where you spent a long time trying to find out who Jack the Ripper really is, and then what you do about this seemingly unstoppable foe. Like, that would have been a much more interesting story to me than being told straight off the bat, oh, he's this guy. This is what you need to do to stop him. There we go. Job done. I just kind of want if you want to stick Jack the Ripper in there, right? The core thing about Jack the Ripper is not that he's some unstoppable killing machine. That's not what's interesting about him. It's the mystery. It's the fact that no one knows who he is. If that's not the story you're telling, if the story you're telling is not an investigation, is not a mystery, then I don't know why you're telling a story about Jack the Ripper. Is what I'm really getting at here.
Well, because that's one of the biggest draws to Jack the Ripper as a storytelling device, anyway, I guess.
Exactly. But I really like their choice of who they choose to make it. I'm going to say it outright because it's within the first 10 pages of the player's handbook, so it's meant to be player public knowledge. Jack the Ripper in this setting is John Dee, the court magician to Elizabeth I of England.
Right.
And the idea is that over time he He founds the Rippers. He prolongs his life indefinitely. He has more and more Ripper tech installed into him until, again, he becomes the monster that he was trying to fight, loses his mind, and goes off on a killing spree.
But that would be cool to find out.
Yeah, I'd want to slowly unravel the mystery that it was John Dee, right?
Yeah.
But they don't do that. They just tell you it's John Dee quite off the bat. But the other thing that gets me is the fact that John Dee is a really interesting historical figure. Now, in my day job, I'm a history researcher at a university, and I specialise particularly in Elizabethan history and in the history of magic and witchcraft and witch hunting and the occult. So John Dee is a guy that I've done a huge amount of academic work on, and I do a lot of teaching on. He's just such an interesting historical figure. There's so many different angles you could have approached John Dee from that aren't, he then put monsters inside himself and went mad. There are so many things about John Dee as a person. The fact that he was meant to be practicing magic, the fact that he believed he was contacting angels, that would have been an interesting way for him to lose his mind, would be to go too far with magic. And have someone else, someone like, say, if you're going to stick Frankenstein in this game, have Frankenstein be the guy that did too much with sticking monster bits into people and went mad.
Yeah, that would have been a good idea.
And, I mean, they do have Frankenstein in there, and that is kind of what Frankenstein did. But then that leads me to go, well, why do you have two villains who got the same basic storyline behind them?
Yeah.
But, again, I'm saying this because I think, not because I think the setting is bad, but because I think the setting can be refined and can be made into something significantly more...
No, I get it. You
satisfying
know,
and tied up.
When you love something and you want to sort of be critical of a tiny little,
this is it. I mean, I complain a lot about Doctor Who, right? That doesn't mean I dislike Doctor Who. It's because I want to see Doctor Who be a good show that a lot more people watch.
I think you're going to be waiting a long time for that.
Show. Yeah, but this is what I'm getting at though. Is there's a reason I complain. I don't complain because I dislike it. I complain because I've got a deep and abiding affection for it. Fair enough. I just want to see one or two small tweaks get made that I think would genuinely make it a better product.
But
yeah, I understand that. That's fair. So, any interesting, cool archetypes that you play in these games?
For Solomon Kane, right? I mean, you got some really good ones. The first off, you got Peasant. That's my favourite one. I'm trying to find them. Oh yeah, so here we go. We got Merchant, we got Missionary, Musketeer, Native, Noble, Pirate, Privateer. It's basically anything you'd expect to see around that time. Treasure Hunter. I mean, they're not amazing, but I suppose that was a bit of a disappointment for me when I opened up the book. But what you can do with them in the world is quite interesting. You got two really good arcane backgrounds, but we'll get into that when we talk about magic. The thing is, it's other than the fact that there are monsters there and what you can do with the really interesting missions, the characters are pretty much based in the history at the time, so they're not. There's nothing crazy aside from if you choose to be an arcane person.
Well, I think you did it with your group. When I ran it too, the players said that is you sort of have to do your own research with history and people around the world. You know, you could be a pirate, you could be a native Indian hunter from back in America, that type of thing.
Yeah, because what my group did, they basically and they chose people from incorrect periods of history, but it doesn't really matter because what you can do is just take that as like an archetype. And one of my guys played a guy based on Christy Cleek or Sawney Bean, who's like one of the first recorded cannibals or something like this, and based his character solely on him, even took his name and stuff like this. And he was basically almost famous in some parts, so people would like roll to recognise him, and he was so well known for being like a cannibal that he could strike fear into people, but just by saying his name and be like, yeah, I'm this guy, by the way, and he had like a really high intimidation, to the point where he once scared somebody literally to death because they rolled on the fear table and got a heart attack. It was awesome. And then we had another guy that was in the employ of the Witchfinder General, which I'm aware was like a few hundred years before that, but it doesn't matter. And then we had another character that was his girlfriend that was actually a witch but hadn't told him, which was awesome. and another guy that was an executioner. So they're a bunch of them like really cool characters, and all put together because they've done terrible things and then been sent to hell and then resurrected. So yeah, it ended up with a really, really interesting party. The archetypes they give you aren't necessarily like, whoa, this is exciting, I can play a peasant, wow, what a day. But it's like, when you actually do a bit of research, there are so many interesting characters from that time. I mean, my mate James was doing research at the time, and we found like loads of really interesting people that were alive at the time. For example, Guy Fawkes, I think, was around at that time, and I think Blackbeard, if I recall correctly, if he's not made up, I can't remember, but there was some famous pirate was around at that time, and we were like, yeah, there's so many cool people that are around at that time that you can just pick one of those and go, cool, I'm going to either be that guy or be somebody like that guy.
Like Gary Busey, right?
Yeah, for some reason Gary Busey ends up in all of our games, but he didn't in this one. My brother was like, you have to put him in the game somewhere. But we had Gary Busey in the Fallout game. We gambled with him to take his armor.
Awesome. So what about Rippers? Is it more flashy?
Rippers is a bit more flashy. Unfortunately, we don't have peasants as a go-to archetype. What we do have is lovable Cockney orphans like Oliver Twist.
Yes.
So I think I've seen a fair few people play lovable Cockney orphans who've then grown up and joined the Rippers. But one of the core things it really does with its factions is to go, look, here's 7 different basic character archetypes, or here's the 7 mini organizations, the branches of the Rippers. So you've got yourself Fraser's Fighters. They're basically led by a fellow that's like Alan Quatermain, and they go digging into ancient Egyptian tombs, punching mummies, lighting them on fire, trudging through the jungles of Africa. So they're sort of big colonial explorers, right? You've got your Old Wilders, who are meant to be very knowledgeable. They all come from Europe. They mostly sort of live in the Black Forest, the Carpathian Mountains, and Romania, Transylvania, that sort of area. So obviously they specialize in vampires and werewolves and all that nonsense. But already you're seeing 2 different, very distinct types of character. The Order of St. George are basically priests sent by either the Vatican or the Church of England or whoever else to go out into the darkness and slay evil. Witch hunters who are super hardline, and they hold no truck with people doing magic. They hold no truck with people becoming monsters. Really interesting, very powerful, but quite antagonistic to some parties' archetype. The Slayers, who are, basically Victorian Buffy. Like, these are your young frontline fighters who are very agile, very in there. And then possibly my favourite of them all, the Masked Crusaders. Now, the Masked Crusaders are a sort of steampunk superheroes that go around the world because they've decided that, no, we're gentlemen. We're people with strong social reputations that Victorian England can't see us going out amongst the peasantry or going out into the streets at night. So therefore, they decided that they're going to disguise themselves as someone else to go out and fight crime, usually becoming the archetype of what they want to embody. So they're led by a fella called the Yankee, who's meant to be over in New York. And it's at that point that you realise that essentially it's Batman.
Oh God, I knew you were going to say that. I was waiting
their
for
entire
it.
Their entire concept is our superpower is money, which means we can afford like a handheld Gatling gun and like a steampunk jetpack, and we can employ like the weird scientists in our party to build us more things, and then we're going to go out and fight monsters like that. But aside from that, you've got all sorts of archetypes. Anything you can imagine existing in the late 19th century is there. You've got cowboys over in America who are out doing whatever it is they do. You've got doctors. A lot of people want to play doctors for whatever reason. It's as though people quite like having party healers around. Again, lovable Cockney orphans. I just adore them.
Alienists.
Alienists. Again, in a game that's a lot about the human mind, the human psyche, clinging onto your reason and your sanity. Having someone in your team playing an alienist, so Victorian psychiatrist, who just between missions, like with a week of downtime, can make a healing roll to just sit there and talk to you about how you're feeling and get you some sanity back by just giving you therapy. There is absolutely a role for a doctor to double as an alienist, and his only job is to sit there in between adventures and just give people tea and tell them to talk about their feelings until they feel less like a monster inside.
That is amazing.
I like it. So again, ran a 40-person game of this over the course of 2 years with people dying and coming back in with new characters. We went through about 70 characters in total. There was one point when an entire party all died on the same mission, and so they all came back as a travelling circus who decided that was their character concept. We're all a travelling circus that goes around the world fighting monsters while posing as a circus. Their concept being, they went, look, vampires are going to come to a place where the circus is held at night with all its big shows, and there's a lot of people there. So vampires are going to come there to try and feast on like young people wandering through the crowds, and that's where we're going to kill them. And we're going to do, and so everything revolves around them being like acrobats and lion tamers with a pet lion, or a ringmaster who is really good at persuading people, or all those sorts of things. Some really creative things you can do with it.
I want to be a midget in a circus with one of those like German war helmets with a spike on it, but my helmet is made of silver, and then you shoot me out of a cannon into a werewolf.
You know what the best thing is? Savage Worlds can do that. You decide to pick the two hindrances that cancel each other out, which are of course small and obese. Because small gives you -1 toughness and obese gives you +1 toughness. And you just play a very short, fat man who can be a cannonball. You basically play Danny DeVito, and that's your core character concept. Except he's wearing a German spiked helmet. And you don't want a cannon, though, because cannons take ages to reload. You want your mate to play the circus strongman who can just lob you at people.
He could be the Rock's son, and he could be called the Pebble.
We need to do this.
I mean, I'm always up for traveling circus-based games. They're a stupid concept that I adore for whatever reason.
There is an original adventure for Rippers that takes place at a circus too. The Laughter.
Yes,
that was a great adventure.
I really liked Laughter of Death. I adapted it for Resurrected to bring it up to speed with the new rules. I think it's great. The reason I was able to adapt it is because the guys that came in as a traveling circus troupe decided that they were all going to have major enemy as their major hindrance. Each of whom was their counterpoint in an evil mirror universe circus troupe made of vampires that was traveling around the world. And so we eventually had a showdown between them and the evil circus troupe after the adaptation of Laughter of Death. I really like that scenario. I think vampires bring a circus together so they can feed on people and so they can turn them and so they can capture slaves and what have you to take as more labourers for their circus is a really great idea. Just something about it is
awesome.
It's pulp horror, and it's great.
You know, I was supposed to be running for my next game in our group. I was supposed to be running Shadowrun, but I think I'm going to run this instead now. I hate Solomon Kane. I'm going to bin it.
Yeah, you've been doing a very poor job, Harrison.
Yeah, but you know what? You know what it is. Solomon Kane is amazing, right? But the thing is, a lot of it. It's all about the horror and stuff like this, and it's not quite as bombastic and crazy. Like, I can tell you about a lot of the missions that we did. I can tell you all of this stuff, and I'm gonna now, but no, I'm not really. But the point is the a lot of it is like this. It's not really like a big crazy setting because it's just our world. A lot of the people are just our people, and then there's a monster in it, right? I mean, one of the scenarios in the Savage Foes of Caine book is that you're walking along, right? You're going to the next place you're going to, and then there's a funeral happening, right? And the women all standing around this grave crying. And then one of the women goes, she says, it's terrible. All the kids keep going either missing or dying, and we don't know why. It's probably something to do with that spooky cave over there. And then you go and investigate, and there's a bunch of goat men in there. I mean, it's really cool, and the whole scenario is awesome. But the thing about it is that it doesn't really compare. Like, it doesn't compare to sort of like, when you're trying to pitch it to somebody, it's not like the best game to pitch. I mean, the way I pitched it was sort of the whole redemption thing of being from hell and stuff like that, and the dark fantasy of it, and I've already done that. But then when you actually get in and play it and roleplay in that universe, it's really, really fun. But I just feel like it doesn't compare as sort of an elevator pitch to Rippers. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't. I can't do a good job of it.
Yeah.
It sucks. I'm going to bin
Fair
it.
enough.
I'm burning it's actually on fire
something
right now.
more. Don't do that. Give it to me first, because it's a beautiful book.
Oh, yeah.
Something I know you really love about Solomon Kane is the magic system. Let's talk about the magic, the arcane backgrounds and magic in each setting.
Yeah, so you got two in here. Now this is pretty cool. Okay, so you got two. So you got two arcane backgrounds. I'm stalling for time because I've forgotten what they're called. The first one is it's called shamanism, right? So this is black magic in quite a very 70s way, right? Because this is used by African people, and it's essentially what it is. The way it works is that in order to do it, you need to have a fetish. Now, I don't mean this in the way that Gary would say it. What I mean is that this can be like it's like a voodoo symbol of some sort. Now, it can be anything from a voodoo doll to a staff made of bone to anything like that. So one of the characters that we had in the campaign was a voodoo shaman, and the reason that he was evil was because he did voodoo experiments on people in his tribe, and he went too far with it, eventually killing his son because he believed that he was had a demon inside him, and then killed his son. So his staff had a femur on it, and that was his fetish. That's what it was. It sounds bloody horrible when you put it that way. So you need to have one of those, and that means you can cast as many times as you like, but if you roll critical fail, then the thing breaks, and you need to spend 2d6 days, I believe it is, making a new one. And you can also still fail on that roll and not make a new one, and then have to do it all over again. And every time... Go on.
If your fetish was a femur, couldn't you just put a cast on it if it broke?
No, because all the magic's gone out of it. Now it's broken. But good one. Carrying on. So every spell in this, it's similar to other settings such as Lankmar and things like this. Every spell has like a casting modifier, and this means you need to spend a number of rounds concentrating to be able to cast it. And every round you spend concentrating, it lessens the penalty. So, for example, you might have blind, which has like a -4 or something like this. And if you spend 4 rounds concentrating, you'll get no penalty on the casting. But if you want to cast it right now, you can just cast that at -4. Boom. And you can do it. Whereas the other arcane background, which is, I believe, just called sorcery, this is the white magic. And this is done by white people. And for that,
of course it is.
Exactly. So for this,
it's not a racist book.
No, it's not at all. But for this, you need components, and this can be something like herbs. I don't know, something like this, and you keep it in your pocket. And herbs, they cost 50p a go, and this is really, really bloody expensive in the world of Solomon Kane. That's a lot of money. So A, it's expensive, and B, they're difficult to cast, which I really like. And each arcane background, similar to other settings, only has limited spells that you can do in it. So magic is both expensive and rare in this world, and that makes it something that people fear.
So let me get this straight. This magic system sounds horrifically racist. I'm just going to start with that premise. Let me get this straight. So you have the black magic that is done by the black people. That's you just need like a bone of a dead kid, and you're good to go. Cast away.
Yeah.
But the white magic by the white people is really expensive.
And you need 50 pence worth of herbs.
Every time. Right? Does it say somewhere in there that that's the reason that white magic is white magic, because the black folk can't afford it? Like, I wouldn't be surprised to read that sentence in this book all of a sudden.
Look, it was written a long time ago, man. All right, just cut him some slack.
Unreal.
I think you guys are hung up on that. I mean, what I'm getting out of this is that the magic system in Solomon Kane is more about rituals than combat mages. So the fact that you have to take time to cast a spell and all that. And I've used the shaman magic for like Native American shamans too. So it doesn't always have to be just about Africans.
Yeah,
that's craziness.
Yeah, you could do that, and additionally, like if you do create a pure mage in this game, you are going to die very quickly. And one of our characters, that guy who played that, his character was called Jack, which isn't the most African name on the planet, but his character, he was named that by white slavers. But anyway, the point is that he did create basically a pure mage, and the whole time, whenever he wasn't casting a spell, he'd be like, this is going to take ages, and he'd just be hitting things with his staff, and he didn't have any real fighting ability, and it would just be awful. So you do have to have like a backup in this game. If you're a mage, chances are you should have a backup. James played Witch, as I said, but he did also have some fighting ability, and he never ever once until the final battle of the game cast a successful spell. Never.
So how did Solomon Kane get past Peg? Because in their Deadlands setting, like one of the main things that you read immediately upon reading the book is that even though back in the Wild West there was slavery, they want you to take that part of the game out of it.
I think I can answer that because this was pre-deluxe, so this might have been before they had that blanket PG-13 rule.
Okay, that might make a bit of sense.
I mean, I think there's a lot of cultural context in that as well, like the fact that what Deadlands is written originally in the 1990s, right, and is written in a location meant to be played by American gamers.
Yes,
and the legacy of U.S. slavery still hangs over the United States to some extent. That still colours a lot of politics and a lot of the American psyche.
Yeah.
In that sense, wanting to go, let's cross this out of an American-based setting. Whereas if we're going to do something that's properly historical, like historical way hundreds of years back, that travels all around the world, there's not going to be that same sort of attachment and cultural context there. It's not sort of right on your doorstep. And so people might be a bit more willing to fly with this.
Yeah.
You've also got to say that I mean, they want to try and faithfully adapt the works of Robert E. Howard, right? And Howard is a guy that lives in Dallas in the 1920s. Dallas and Fort Worth in the 1920s, there's a lot of, I mean, read Pigeons from Hell, right? And you get a concept of the kind of tone that the author goes for. And he's better than some of his contemporaries, sure, but at the same time, he's still a guy living in the 1920s in the southern United States. There's only so far that you can expect it to be, I guess, progressive in the modern day. And so, if you want to faithfully adapt that setting, you got to take that baggage with it. And actually, I think it's better that we go. Robert E. Howard's legacy has this in a nuanced way that we can accept and discuss, rather than go, we're going to cross it out from Robert E. Howard's legacy and pretend that he never wrote like this.
Yeah, I mean, it does also mention, like, slavery and say that while, as far as I remember, I think there's a passage in it that says something along the lines of, like, NPCs and things like this may have slaves, but try to discourage players from doing it, as far as I'm aware. I can't remember, but then there's a passage also about sexism and just says, like, it says exactly how far you want to carry this historical sexism into your games is a matter of choice, but it does basically give you context on what it was like at the time. And it's like, like you say, it's about being historically accurate because it was hundreds of years ago. I think it's kind of different, but yeah, I think I don't think it's necessarily offensive. Do you know what I mean? But
it's more for flavor.
But it does make you cringe when you read it. But it's only because it's like a bit.
That's it. And Rippers does the same sort of thing. It says, look, the Rippers themselves are an egalitarian organisation. No matter where you're from, no matter what your social status, no matter what gender you are, you're fine. inside the Rippers. However, gaining access to certain social situations is going to be a matter of your sex. It is going to be a matter of your social class. It is going to be a matter of your race. And so accepting historical reality while still allowing the role-playing aspect to let players get away from that inside their own organization is quite a useful dichotomy to have.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of, having that conversation with your group, and while you probably know your group, you know what you can get away with. Are we going to explore those themes, or are we just going to skim over? It's like rape and that, that type of thing in RPGs. Do you really role play the details of rape and pillaging for orcs and all that in your RPGs? You probably don't.
What about magic and rippers? Is it quite as racist as Solomon Kane?
Well, I mean, that depends whether you talk about original flavor rippers or rippers resurrected. So I'll talk about resurrected first, because that's what we're dealing with, and it has the 4 core styles of magic that carry across. And then let's talk about a bit about original and what didn't get carried across to resurrected. So you've got 4 major styles of magic. You've got your miracles, because obviously in a world where the forces of darkness are out fighting people, and you've got vampires, and you've got the Order of St. George bringing priests out to go fight monsters, in any world where you can hold a cross in front of you and it turns a vampire to ash, you're going to have God giving people miracles. Now, as per the book, this seems to be very Christian in its flavor. I've had one guy play Solomon Hertz, the fighting rabbi, and as far as I can see, there's nothing stopping you playing non-Christian faiths. It's just that it being Victorian England, Christianity is obviously the big one where they expect most people to go with blessed.
I just had this wicked idea of playing a rabbi with those curls that come down the side of their heads, but they look like little springs or little pigtails. But your magic ability would be like Bolt, and those things fly out and just whack people, and then they recoil.
Is this offensive?
I don't know. I think Solomon Hertz came close a couple of times. So he was an adept, so he had martial artist. He was trained in jiu-jitsu. He had throwing stars of David. He hit someone with Torah scrolls once. It was great. But other types of magic in there, you got yourselves Rosicrucian magic. So that's your sort of classical John Dee style magic. This is where John Dee as the historical figure becomes important. This idea that your magic system is about calling on spirits to work your magic for you. So it's similar to Blessed in some ways. The difference really being the flavor. You don't have to be a good boy for God to keep giving you powers. You just have to ask the spirits nicely.
That's awesome. Ripper sounds so much better. I want to be a kosher rabbi, and then I'll just be like a food magic guy, where I can't cast my magic unless my food is kosher.
Mate, I'm there for that. So we need to do this Jewish circus troupe game,
right?
Where you're the kosher hot dog seller that travels with us. But aside from that, you've got yourselves weird science, because you've got people making steampunk gadgets, that sort of thing. That's all well and good. That's quite nice. You've also got psychics. So the idea that psychic people are something quite new, but this goes along with the whole alienist thing, this whole Victorian hypnotist thing going on. Now, they've got some really interesting power list. They don't really have any direct offensive powers. What they have is stuff like confusion and puppet and blind and telekinesis. All the things that are completely invisible. And with the exception of telekinesis, are much more about how you speak to people and get inside their heads. Yeah?
Again, perfect for a circus mesmerist.
Why is this all about circuses?
Because this is the game that we're doing. We've decided that Rippers is now all about circuses.
Fine.
Like, fuck the flavor. This is actually a game about circus troops fighting vampires.
Okay.
Because that I feel fundamentally is what Simon Lucas couldn't admit he really wanted deep down with this setting. And we're just bringing forward what his initial intention in his heart of hearts was. But beyond that, back in original Rippers, you've got 2 things that get left behind that never make it across to the Resurrected reboot. Rituals. So rituals that come along in the Horror Companion, right? Into Savage Worlds main, and probably get, as far as I'm concerned, perfected in East Texas University as a setting. one of the first attempts that Pinnacle does to make a ritual system occurs in the companion to the original version of Rippers. Really interesting. A lot about you gather some ingredients. It has the really precise PowerPoint cost that you work out to extend it to a duration of days or weeks or hours. You spend hours casting each one of these spells, and then you just walk around. You go, no, I'm going to stick deflection on myself for 1d6 weeks. And then you just walk around not being able to be hit for the next few weeks. It's very, very powerful. It's very easy to power game if you want to build a dedicated ritual caster. It just means that basically any given Rippers party with prep time can just tank pretty much anything. I can see exactly why they took it out. I think it's worth reassessing its place in the game. And so I'd very much in that respect say that it's worth integrating the Savage Worlds Horror Companion from Deluxe into Rippers Resurrected. So you can keep that ritual magic, you can keep the omens, the signs, the portents. Then if we're going to go to the other thing they left behind is I don't want to say it's called Arcane Background Gypsies, but it's not that far off.
Uh-oh.
It is
here we go.
So it's got its own power list. It is Arcane Background Curse Magic.
Gypomancy.
Yeah, so the opening sentence of this is: the Gypsies, also known as the Romani, Rom, or Roma, inhabit many Eastern European countries. Although they can also be found in Western Europe, those of the East have remained true to their ancient heritage. And then describes that if you're playing a Gypsy, you get access to these special spells that no one else gets, which are all curses.
Wowzers!
As you can level curses on people. That's its own can of worms to unpack. I just want to say this before we start saying that Solomon Kane is unique in terms of its presentation of I guess ethnic magics.
Yeah.
let's say that. So I don't think this is unique amongst role-playing games. You see it in, of course, World of Darkness. Old World of Darkness has its Gypsies core source book, and I think is definitely a product of its time. There's a time in the 1990s. Well, there's a time in the 1990s and the early 2000s when people try and transition away in their role-playing games from making these other cultures sort of unknowable or villainous. And a lot of this whole, no, they're noble and wise in a way that white Europeans cannot be, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is a lot of where you get the shamanic magic in Deadlands from. It's a lot of where you get... I mean, the game Werewolf the Apocalypse from White Wolf, right? That's basically that concept placed right off there. But I think this is also where you get this sort of fascination with Romani gypsies in the 1990s, early 2000s, in role-playing games from, and giving them their own type of magic, their own sort of unique and hidden lore, is a reassessment to sort of say in original Rippers, these guys aren't all villains. They're not all bad guys working for Dracula. But I think it's a sort of ham-fisted and misaimed redirection of trying to make them heroic characters, right? I guess basically what I'm saying is, look, there's currently 4 official arcane types within Rippers Resurrected. There's a couple of other arcane options from the original companion that players might want to reassess, and people might want to talk about how they can integrate into their games. But for the most part, I think they've built themselves a really solid magic system with Rippers Resurrected. I just think it can be complemented by the Horror Companion.
I should also point out that in Solomon Kane, the one thing I forgot to mention is that the magic in that game there's not really much harmful magic in that either. That's one thing I forgot to mention. So it's kind of similar to the... One of the classes
to the psychics.
That's the one, yeah. So it's you're kind of dealing with. I think the worst you've got is that one that makes people feel drowsy. You can knock people out with it. I forget what it's called.
Slumber.
Yeah, that's the baby. So yeah, like
right.
Smite as well. But anyway, Eric, you were saying. Sorry, I was interrupting you.
No, it's all right. Just wanted to move on to the presentation. I mean, the trade dress, and I mean, I've read both books, so I know that they're quite different. But especially if you look at Rippers Resurrected, the format is quite different from Solomon Kane. So what's the difference, Harrison? First.
Solomon Kane is an absolutely gorgeous hardback book. I mean, if you turn to page 114, you will see a wonderful piece of artwork of Solomon Kane running up the stairs, shooting some, let's call them what they are, ethnic people in the face, and it is a wonderful book, just full colour hardcover book.
Wow.
I'm just kidding. It's not a racist book. It's not racist. Okay, but anyway, no, it is amazing. It is. It's full color. It's one of the best books that Pinnacle's done. Loads and loads of original artwork in there, and the layout is spectacular. It's one of the big ones. You know, proper RPG size. None of this. Oh, it's graphic novel size, but actually no graphic novels are that size. So why are you saying that? Just call it travel size or something like that. Shut up, Pinnacle. It's actually a proper RPG full size book, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Loads of amazing color artwork in there. Some of the best presentation I've ever seen. But I will say this: Rippers is probably going to win this as well, because the fact of the matter is that I've got that box set and I've had a flick through it, and it's so nice.
Well, there's something else you forgot to mention, is that with Solomon Kane, you have all the rules to play the game in the book. You don't need the deluxe. That's the main difference, I think.
Yeah, that's the cool thing. But it is pre-deluxe rules, but you could always get the, I don't know, writer or whatever. But yeah, all the rules are in this book. So this is when Pinnacle used to do the thing of having all the rules in the same book. God, man, I wish my memory is better. But the point is that it's all in that same book. So it's a big fat book. It's just called The Savage World of Solomon Kane, and it's like a big RPG rule book. So everything's in there. So what that meant is, for those people at the table that don't have a copy of Savage Worlds, when it comes to time to level up by your skills and all of this, every edge, every hindrance, all of this stuff is all contained in that book. So if you say somebody's sitting there waiting to pick an edge or something, and you're like, okay, just take this, and you can hand them this book and be like, yeah, I've got one here, and it's got everything in there. And pretty much all the edges and stuff like this are the same as the ones in Core anyway. So yeah, it's really, really handy to have. Love it.
Cool. It is. One of the things that we didn't touch on was Ripper's ability to rip like fangs. You were talking a bit about that, but how does it work mechanically inside the game, Connor?
So mechanically, you've got yourself a knowledge skill in there, which is knowledge rip attack. And so effectively you go in, you roll that to try and successfully rip something out of a creature. Ideally one freshly dead, or freshly re-dead, or re-undead, or whatever else you want to call it when you kill a vampire. It's then going to be a surgery process, so that's going to be another knowledge rip attack roll with a few hours taken aside for someone to get anaesthetized and put under the knife to have it installed in them. Now, each of these implants, well, they have a modifier as to how difficult it is to install them. So things like giving someone fangs is quite small fries. Cutting someone's hands off and replacing them with the claws of a vampire, so they can start just ripping into people with their hands, that's slightly more difficult. And if it fucks up, they suddenly they're missing a hand because the surgery didn't reattach properly. They've just basically lost a hand. So having a surgeon who has specialised into knowledge rip attack that is happy to throw bennies at this is really what you need to be doing. The more difficult ones are things like, say, replacing someone's spine or heart. Or the most difficult one of all is giving someone the brain of an ancient vampire, which requires you to, as a late 19th century surgeon, perform complex brain surgery and a full brain transplant.
That's a very defeatist attitude. Come on.
But it turns out if you mess that one up, then they just die because you've ripped their brain out and not been able to install a new one in its place. They're just sort of dead now. But if
you can make elixirs too, right?
Yes, you can use your knowledge chemistry to start boiling down extracts of these things. So say you've got. I'm just going to try and flick through a couple of these to get an idea of what we're talking about here for things which can be implanted. But say you've got your ancient's organs, right? These are things that give you resistance to poison. You can choose, instead of installing them into someone, to melt them down into a potion that you can just give to someone. They can neck it, and they get that effect for the next 2d6 rounds. rather than just having it permanently in them. Now that's
lot
quite
less invasive and dangerous too.
Exactly. There's not really a chance of losing your character if that goes wrong. But it means that say demon's blood, you can either undergo surgery to have all your blood replaced by demon's blood. What that means is that from then on you're just +4 toughness against fire, +4 on all rolls against fire-based effects and heat-based effects. So you're walking fine through hell, right? Conversely, if someone just goes, no, you can drink the demon's blood instead, and you go, right, just for the duration of this combat, I'm fine. It's this mix-up of whether or not you want to risk sending your character permanently insane, or whether you want to just have a short-term benefit rather than it being permanently switched on as an ability.
See, the way I did it in Solomon Kane, because it was kind of similar, where the players were taking the power from the monsters, was again way less exciting. I hate Solomon Kane now, but the way I did it right, what I did right. Now it was amazing. I loved it, but the way I did it was every time they killed a beast, right? It's like you play Dark Souls. Anyone Dark Souls? Good.
No.
So basically, in that game, when the beast dies, their kind of soul, their energy goes into the person that killed it. So as the players killed the things, they would get XP, and that was what it was. And then they would be able to get an advance, and that advance was them using the monster's energy to power up. And they were the only people capable of doing that. And yeah.
Deadlands does something like that too, but you have to be harrowed. So.
Yeah.
So what's the presentation like in Rippers then? I mean, I already know, but I want you to answer.
Yeah. So presentation-wise, we're talking about like the apotheosis of what Pinnacle does with its modern layout. The artwork is beautiful. The layout is beautiful. The bordering, the headings, they're all lovely, is what I'm getting at. It feels very Victorian, feels very put together, feels as though you're flicking through something not quite aged, but with a lot of gilded edges, a lot of pomp and circumstance,
And
which it's absolutely what they're going for.
Do you have the box set?
I don't have the box set, no.
Because I was going to say, one of the things about that is as well the I've got the ETU one as well, and in that it's like really worth the money. But the Rippers one is so like packed full of stuff, and the maps, because you get the Ripper Lodge one, and then it's got like a world map. Then you get like a tomb one and another one. It's like a caves one as well. Yeah. It's got the screen in there. It's got 3 books in there. It's like the player's guide, the DM guide, and then like
Frightful Expeditions,
That's
which
the one.
is just an entire book full of savage tales all around the world, so that when you're not doing plot points, no matter where you are in the world, there will always be a one-shot you can run while your party travel from one place to the next.
Yeah, so it's got that, the bennies, the dice. It's got everything you need. Like, but it feels like they put a bit more into that than they have the other settings, and like that. I think that comes into presentation a little bit, because I was blown away with it. Genuinely, it's so cool, and
I think there's a couple of things there. First off, you got to remember that this was made much later than Solomon Kane.
Yeah,
like Rippers Resurrected is part of, like I say, their new idea of what the layout should look like. It doesn't have all the core rules tucked in there, but it does have the quick 5-step character creation process. It just doesn't have a list of all the edges and hindrances that are in the core rules. In that case, it's a much slimmer book. I very much like the fact they've got a player's guide and a GM guide as separate books, though. Again, something that's quite new in terms of what they've been doing. But it's nice for me as a GM to be able to have the GM book and still have the players be able to refer to what their edges do, to what their Ripper Tech does, to what powers they have available to them, all that sort of thing. While I've got a separate book to be looking through for the monsters, so we don't all have to own all the GM stuff as well.
certainly, yeah.
In terms of their presentation, you've also got to think about this was a big relaunch. Right, this is a setting that had been around for a decade by the time they decided to relaunch it in 2015 with a Kickstarter. And they were blown away by how many people backed this, by just how much money people were willing to give to the Rippers Kickstarter. So they could do so much more with it. They could do the custom bennies as stretch goals. They could do the maps and the entire extra book in there. I don't think it's necessarily that they hugely preferred this setting, but it's the fans were willing to pay for it. The fans evidently wanted it that much that, I mean, they're a great company. They gave the fans what they wanted and more.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is a little bit like what Solomon Kane is like. I don't know. It's just, it's not, I don't know, it's not as flashy as Rippers, but it is such a beautiful book. And the way that they've supported it as well is pretty good. I mean, it's not still getting supported nowadays, obviously, but they've got, like, there's another hardback book, The Savage Foes of Solomon Kane, which I've mentioned several times. Kind of similar to, what's that, Frightful Expeditions that you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a monster manual type thing, but all it is literally just 12 monsters, and it's 12 monsters, and each one has its own, one shot, and that's it. So it's like it tells you all about the monster or thing or whatever it is, and then they each have their own campaign and one shot thing. So then, in addition to that, they're all statted up, and some of them have maps as well. Some of them don't. Some of them are more simple, and it's really cool. And then there was another one. That
it's a really good book. It's a lot like the Grim Prairie Tales for Deadlands. Yeah, exactly that format.
Like yeah. And then I've got there was another one as well, which I can't remember what it's called, but it was like a really tight, like pamphlet type thing with 3 adventures in it, and I ran one from that, which I think I made a mistake there because it's the first one I ran, and it was called the Uffington Dragon, and it's a really, really cool adventure based on the Uffington Horse, which is like a place in England, right? And it was basically like. This whole adventure. This is the first one I ran, and it's like this guy in this town in England is convincing everyone that like there's monsters in this town, and it turns out there aren't. So it's like, well, the first adventure in this monster hunting thing that I've done, it turns out there aren't monsters. So what I did is I made the twist that it turns out there aren't monsters, but he's actually wrong and there actually are monsters. So there's a twist to the twist.
There's also the Path of Caine too, I think.
Yeah,
that's
another plot point campaign. Yeah. I don't know if I'm a big fan of it, but
in Rippers, does it have like the plot point campaign have like a Men in Black sort of flavor where Will Smith is just doing his thing, and then all of a sudden he runs across some kind of crazy, weird alien that he doesn't really know is an alien, and then you get indoctrinated by meeting Van Helsing? Is that how it sort of starts? Like, how do you?
No, unfortunately, the campaign starts with the original plot point campaign starts with you guys being at dinner when you've already been invited and completed your basic training with the organization. So it starts at the beginning of your career with the Rippers, but you're already very much a member who's been brought into the secrets of what's going on. Second campaign starts much the same way. You're already an existing member of this organization, which is its own thing, and that's fine. But again, I think, like you say, there would be something there that would have something going for it. I think that'd be a really interesting concept to do. And again, like I was saying earlier about the idea that what I'd really want from Rippers as a setting is more mystery. And that would help deliver on the mystery aspect for you to be normal people who then slowly get taken into this, as opposed to already starting with all the knowledge about monsters.
I think for me that was one of the most appealing things about ETU.
Yes,
there's a lot of that build up to, you're introduced to something like this critter. He jumps out the window and he takes off, and then you spend basically like your time dealing with it, trying to determine what it is, how to find it, how to trap it, how to kill it, and then you end off with this like glorious battle against this crazy monster that literally could tear you to shreds. And that sort of seems to be their their what's the word I'm looking for? Their guidelines for how do you play each adventure, which I thought was just fantastic. There's more mystery, more research, more learning about the critters. I thought that was neat.
I'm running East Texas University at the minute. I'm going through the Degrees of Horror plot point, and we're getting just towards the end of junior year, and my players love it. And I think, like you say, the amount of investigation stuff, the amount of going, what is that? I have no idea. Let's try and work out what it is, has led to some of the best role-playing. That's what the majority of each session seems to be taken up with. Is just people running wildly about, going off in a party of 5, having 3 or 4 different ways in which they want to investigate things. Like, one of them goes to the library, the other one goes and talks to some people around town, the other one goes and talks to her sorority sisters and goes, have you seen it? What do you think it is? And one of them just sits there on conspiracy theory image boards to see what the internet can say. And between each of them, it's really interesting seeding information in different ways. So it feels as though everyone's contributing, but the chase for information is itself fun and leads to a lot of really good role-playing.
You can put that into Rippers and Solomon Kane as well.
Yeah. In fact, what I'll say just on the note of Rippers, mystery comes through really well in one of the Frightful Expedition scenarios. So while I might have been a bit unfair with saying, well, there's just the same sort of few generic monsters that get applied in every situation, there is one in Frightful Expeditions who I love. He is called the Lizard King. He is a half man, half lizard, whose skin is entirely gold and scaly, who runs the New York Mafia.
Yes.
And everything about this is just intended that you spend a few weeks of in-character time in New York fighting the mob, who for some reason have magic powers, and then find out that there's just a literal lizard wearing a human skin suit running the New York Mafia, and you have to go fight him. And it's nothing in the entire rest of this game universe ever refers to that event ever again, and I love it for just how isolated and off the wall it is.
That sounds awesome.
But when you mentioned the pamphlet earlier, the Rippers box set, I believe, does come with the pamphlet, which is a long single adventure rather than a plot point, called Lord of the Underworld.
Yeah, it's the one that comes with the GM screen.
Yeah, it's Journey to the Center of the Earth, but done with Rippers. So you fight dinosaurs, you fight giant apes, you go through lava flows. It's a sort of high-level adventure made for top-end of veteran heroic characters that, if played to the letter of it, can play a lot like Tomb of Horrors. Sweet. In terms of it just being such a lethal cleaver for PCs with random events, the fact that you spend so much time in the dark going through tunnels, and there's just a random chance that you fall down a pit to the center of the earth and die because you fall into the earth's core.
Well,
that's the way your character can die.
When you ran us through a sort of mega dungeon in Rippers, like it was almost like classic AD&D mixed with Castlevania in Rippers, and that really worked. It was awesome. I've done kind of similar things with Solomon Kane as well, but I don't think it was quite as good. But I think we're running slightly long, so we probably do need to wrap up a little bit. So what we'll do now is we'll go to Eric and Gary for which one they would pick out of these two. And I think I know which way this is going to go. I'm getting my lighter ready, guys, to set my books on fire. Gary, let's hear what you got to say.
Rippers. Done.
Eric?
I ran and played in both, and I love them both. But for the purpose of this show, I think you did really poor. That was really a poor attempt to defend Solomon Kane, Harrison, and Connor did an amazing job at selling Rippers. So I'm going to go with Rippers.
I don't think there was much that, like, if you look at the individual aspects like that, nothing on Solomon Kane does really beat it. It doesn't, because it's very historical. There's nothing that it really does outside a core, and then there's some uncomfortable
I love
aspects.
Righteous Fury, the Righteous Rage, Righteous Fury. That's one of the best setting rules. Really?
Yeah.
I loved it.
Oh, okay. But yeah.
No,
one of the cool things I did like is those uncomfortable aspects of the kind of time and setting did lead to a lot of really cool role playing things. But other than that, yeah, like when you stack it up against it, it's not going to have as much of a cool elevator pitch as I said earlier, and that's just it. I agree with you, man. I didn't do a good job of defending it, but this is what I'm saying. I'm gonna have to play Rippers, man. This is why I bought the box set, man, because it looks so damn good. And after I played it with Connor, I was like, I've wasted 8 months of my damn life playing this.
Mate,
F it, shit. Don't anyone buy it.
Wow.
I've been meaning to buy it for years. I'm a massive Robert E. Howard fan, and I've just not got round to buying Savage World of Solomon Kane yet.
No, it's good, man. Get it. But if you've got Rippers, don't bother.
I mean, I've now apparently got a circus troupe game to run, so who knows?
Yeah, if you ever want to run an actual play for us, man, please do. We'll edit it. We'll make it sound cool.
So
don't add more GMing to my plate, please.
I just want to do a dramatic representation of a small story that I've currently written during this episode, where we're in court and the defense lawyer is played by Harrison. And so the prosecutor, played by Connor, makes a really good point, and Harrison goes, "Yeah, F it, you're right. My defendant's guilty." And
he'd be going straight to jail.
Right?
Yeah, man.
Sorry, buddy. You just pat him on the head. You're like, yeah, you suck. You're done. You're going in the bin.
Here's my honest opinion, though. I think that they do very different things. But the thing is that if you want a more grounded, gritty thing of monster hunting, where you're just it's a more, I'm gonna put it this way, like believable, in air quotes, realistic type monster hunting game, then go for Solomon Kane. If you want something more bombastic and fun, cinematic, then go for Rippers. Is that fair to say, do you think, Connor?
I think that's fair to say. What I would also bring up is I know that I have spent some time complaining about Rippers in this podcast, and again, one of EM says that I do like the setting, but if you want to run something that has more mystery to it, run Solomon Kane. If you want to run something that's quieter, a long, drawn-out kind of horror, Solomon Kane seems like the thing to do it. If you want to run action that happens to involve monsters, rather than the monsters being a horrific element necessarily,
yeah. We did a lot of investigative stuff in Solomon Kane, and it always worked out good. I did one episode based on The Ring, but instead of a cursed videotape, it was a book.
Yeah, I mean, having ran both, to me, yeah, Solomon Kane felt more like campaign with character arcs, whereas Rippers, or it might just be the way I ran it, but Rippers felt more like Monster of the Week to me, where, okay, this week we're chasing a mummy, and next week we'll be chasing werewolves, and it's more action-packed, I'd say.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because Solomon Kane did end where it was all about the characters in the end, because we were just they were going from place to place fighting different monsters, and they did have the villain, who in this case was Solomon Kane, because I like to do things wrong, but in the end it did end up with all of the characters sort of having this really tear-jerking moment, with all of them saying goodbye to each other and saying what they're going to do with their lives and stuff, and it was all about them, and so it did have this big character arc of redemption, and everyone getting all teary-eyed at the table and stuff, so maybe you're right. But anyway, that's it, everyone. This was depressing.
Let's wrap it up.
Yep.
Yo, motherfuckers, you all best back up. I always got a gun, I always come strap up. This ain't a game of pool, it ain't no time for no rack up. It's the motherfucking time for the motherfucking wrap up. Anyone who disagrees will get smack up. See me back in school when I shouldn't have learned to add up. Found a gun on the floor, instead I picked that up. Anyway, sorry, I'm motherfucking back up. What I'm trying to say is it's time for the wrap up. Yeah, this one goes out to all the ladies and all the men out there. Everyone in the front row, grease up. Yeah. Oh yeah. So Connor, do you want to plug your punk rock setting at all, or is there anything else you'd like to plug?
So yeah, I would like to quickly plug punk rock. Is the current working title for it, probably what I'm going to try and launch it under. It is currently a 90,000 word monster sitting on my hard drive of a Savage setting best encapsulated as This Is Spinal Tap meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
And,
in which you play a band in the late 1970s punk scene in London who discover that monsters are real and have to and you go on a band tour around the country fighting monsters in each location. There's magic base that you learn by listening to heavy metal tapes backwards, and it teaches you ancient demonic sorcery, because it turns out that all those concerned Christian parent groups were correct. And yeah, Harrison
Is David
played
Bowie a villain?
David Bowie's not presently a villain, but I can certainly do a rewrite. Yeah.
you could get in trouble for that, though. A lot of people like David Bowie, Eric. I don't know if you know. Don't know if you've looked outside your window.
There's also Paul McCartney is definitely dead. Paul McCartney is definitely dead, and there was a conspiracy to cover that up.
What?
That's a core part of the setting.
But no, I played this at SavageCon, and it was absolutely spectacular. I hadn't had this much fun in a while. It was such a it was a good laugh. It was very very pulpy, very funny, and there was a bit with a guitar amp, it's like a monstrous guitar amp, like a mimic that came to life, and we tried to kill it with a toilet brush and like pouring a pint into it and stuff. And there was a battle of the bands that we played using the social conflict rules, and we guitarist, I think, was strumming the guitar and sending bolt spells off, and that was the first time we'd ever seen him do magic. And we were trying to play the song, and as he was doing it, bolts of lightning were coming out of his guitar, and we were like, "How did you do that?" And still playing the song and stuff, and it was awesome. We were fighting vampires in an alleyway with a fire extinguisher. It was absolutely amazing. It's so much fun, and also really captures the punk rock sort of aesthetic as well. It was amazing. So yeah, check that out.
Sounds cool, but are you self-publishing this? Is it going to be on Swag?
So my plan is to hopefully in the next couple of months have it ready to send off to Pinnacle. Talk to them about whether it would be better as an official licensee or as Swag, and I will then be posting updates as soon as I know that.
Awesome.
But, for the time being, it's sort of floating around in the ether rather than something I can tell you how to buy it right now. I'm just saying, keep your eye out for it.
But if you do want to buy it,
we will.
Slip Connor £100.
And I'll send you the imageless, completely unedited PDF as it currently stands. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So if you want to contact,
sounds like a good deal.
So if you want to contact us, you can do. We've got an email address. It's thewilddie@gmail.com, or we're on Google+, Facebook, YouTube, all of that stuff at The Wild Die Podcast. And we're on the Nerds International community if you want to mingle with us. And we're on Twitter, of course, which is at The Wild Die. And if you like what we do, then obviously you're in a mental institution. But if you can get out of there long enough to donate to us on Patreon, please do. That's patreon.com/The Wild Die. And of course, at this point, we'd like to thank all of our current patrons with the following song.
Yeah! Yeah! Sean, Richard, Jason, Kennedy, J. West, Ray, Aristia, Conrad, Erasmus, Norbert. Murder Hobo Show, yeah! Ron Town, Alan Ray, Corridor Trim. Steven Dragon Spawn, Manuel Sam's Pure Mongrels, Obvious Fantasy, RPG, Mercy, Joy Stack, and Bubbles, yeah! Peter Adams, Tucker, Mr. Stagg, yeah! James Jowenheim, Digital Dungeon Master, yeah! Remy Villado, Gil, Joshua Winstred, John Peterson, Greg Bruney, and it's called Keith Slayer, yeah!
It was great to have a showdown after all these months, and Connor, you did great, and thank you for talking about Rippers.
Hey, no worries. Thanks for having me on. Like that was a lot of fun.
Harrison, you suck.
wasn't much of a
we do that already.
Yeah, it wasn't much of a showdown. It was more of a bitch slapping.
Yeah, I don't mind, man. I sort of thought this was going to happen because I was pretty scared because like when I played Rippers at SavageCon, I was like, Oh my god, this like does so much cool stuff, and Solomon Kane is basically just core, and then they've gone, hey, you know the world we live in? You could play in that if you want. So, alright, cool.
Alright, so yeah. See you next time, folks. This is Eric saying, grab your sword by the balls.
This is Harrison saying, grapple the skies.
And this is Gary saying, keep your pants on. Keep it fun. Thanks, everyone. We're out.
We're out.